What is up, guys? Dr. Robert. Before you watch the rest of this video, there's something I forgot to explain, and that is the Preferences tab inside of Ableton. This is important to set up, otherwise you won't hear anything. So to get to the Preferences, you can hit Command, comma if you're on Mac, or you can go up to the live bar right here and click Preferences. Not sure if you guys can see that, it might actually be cut off. But click Preferences up here and go up to the top bar, live, command, comma, live. And you need to first set your ins and outs, which is important. So if you have an audio interface, you would go to audio input device and set your input. If you were trying to use your microphone to say record vocals, or if you had a USB microphone, or if you wanted to use your Mac's built-in microphone, you would go to a MacBook Pro microphone. Right now I'm not recording anything with a microphone. I don't need any inputs right now, since we're just working on electronic music. So I'm actually just going to click no device on audio input. Now audio output device is important, because if this isn't selected correctly, then you won't hear anything. So right now mine has MacBook Pro speakers selected, which means that anything that I play through Ableton is going to come out my MacBook Pro speakers. What this also means is that if I were to play something through Ableton right now, you guys would not be able to hear it, because it would just go straight to my MacBook Pro speakers. I actually have to switch this to my Black Hole 2 channel or this multi-output device that I've created, which includes that and my headphones. So I'm going to switch this to this. If you're using headphones, you should switch it to external headphones. If you're using your MacBook Pro speakers, you should switch it to MacBook Pro speakers. If you have an audio interface that you are using and you have connected, you should switch that to your audio interface. I don't have an interface hooked up right now, so it's not on there. If you are on Zoom taking one-on-one lessons from me, you should select Zoom audio device, because that's really important, because that's the only way I'll be able to hear your stuff. So just a quick aside before you watch the rest of the quick start guide, this preferences menu is pretty important. Also, I keep my sample rate at 44/100, high quality. The buffer size, I usually, depending on what I'm doing, keep it at 512 to 126. If you're at 120, these lower samples, these lower buffer sizes are going to tax your computer a little bit harder. So if you have a slower computer, I would suggest keeping it at about 5. I wouldn't go any higher than 512 to 256, and run some tests on your computer, see how powerful it is, and see what you can run your computer at, and whichever one of these works the best for you. I would suggest somewhere between, I would suggest 128 to 512. I would say these three are going to be the best bet for most people. So, yes. Enjoy the rest of the video. Peace. Okay, what is up, everybody? This is Dr. Robert here with a quick start video guide of just how to get set up and going making music on Ableton. So usually when you've not opened Ableton yet, you open it up and you get this screen, and this is the default template that Ableton gives you. First tip, press the tab button. You can press the tab button and it will switch you over to this screen, or you can press this button right here and that'll switch you back and forth. This is called session view, and then this is your arrange view. And at least when starting out, arrange view is, I'm going to say, the better way to go. It's a little bit easier to understand, and just the way it's laying out makes a little more sense. So the first thing that I like to do to get going is set up a new template, and usually what that entails is every time you open it, it'll open up in a different way. So usually what I like to do is I like to start with one MIDI track and one audio track. I like to have a reverb on A, a delay on B, which they already have, and I like to put a limiter on the master. I just feel like it makes mixing a little bit easier, and I boost it by 6 decibels, because the reason I like to do this is because if something isn't going to sound good in the mix, it's not going to sound good in the master, and the limiter boosting levels like this is going to kind of show some of the things that maybe your mix is lacking. So I like to do that. Some people will tell you not to do this. I do it every time. I also like to set the ceiling to -0.1, and what that's going to do is basically just catch any of the peaks to make sure our master here isn't clipping. So yeah, one MIDI track, one audio track, reverb bus, delay bus, and limiter on the master. That's what I like to do. To save that as a template, you go to File, Save Live Set as Template or Default Set. This is usually my default set, so I'm going to click Save as Default Set, and that's going to pull up what my, that's going to be, every time you start a new project, this is what you're going to open up to. So Save as Default Set, it's going to say Default Live Set. I'm just going to say Tutorial, but you can call this whatever you want. The one that I actually use, I usually color my stuff and will color all my tracks differently, just kind of the way I like it. I have my tempo set a little bit differently. That's my 2022 default, so I'm going to call this one Tutorial Default. Okay, saved. So now, whenever I go to File, New Live Set, I'm not going to save that. It will open up this exact thing that we just had. And I like doing this, like I said, because it gives you a reverb, a delay, 2 tracks to work with because you're going to want to use MIDI and you're going to want to use audio, and it gives you the limiter on the master, which I like I said, don't have to. Some people might tell you it's not a good idea. I like to do it. Okay, so template setup. Every time you open up a new project, you're going to have this, which, like I said, I like. To get started, you need to understand what a MIDI track is and what an audio track is. A MIDI track basically sends information to a software instrument and tells it what notes to play. So if we load up an instrument, I'm going to use drum bus because I always like, whenever I'm starting off making music, I like to start with a pretty simple drum pattern. So, I said drum bus, I meant drum rack. So I'm going to load drum rack up in there. Now we have drum rack, and if you subscribe to my Patreon, you will also have this best samples folder. Now if you're not subscribed to mine and you don't have any sample packs or you don't have any sample folders, I would suggest going to the internet. You can get a Splice account for pretty cheap, or you can go to, I think it's freesoundsonline.com or something like that, and there you can find all kinds of sounds. I suggest you go through, figure out and pick what kind of sounds you're going to need. As you can see here, I have like a whole bunch of different categories, and inside of all these categories are different samples of whatever the category is. So what I usually start with is a kick and a snare, so I'm going to go down to my kicks folder here, and I'm sample snitching on myself, but okay. And I'm just going to start with that kick. Usually I'll pick a couple different kicks, so we'll do that kick, and we'll do this kick. So now I have 2 different kicks. Now we'll go find a snare. So, and while you're doing this, you should be thinking, like, what kind of beat do you want to make? Some people like snares, some people like claps, some people like rim shots. Just kind of depends on what you're going for. I like these bill snares because they sound very dry. You can do a lot of stuff to them. Do this bill copy snare here, and then we'll grab one of these 2. Okay, so now you have kick and snare rack. First thing our kids suggest to do after you get to that point is rename this kick and snare, or in this case I'll do K and S. K and S for kick and snare. Now, depending on what type of music you're going to want to make, your beat is going to be different. So consider what kind of music you're going to make. I typically like kind of the dubstep, the 1-2, the kick snare beat. So that's what I'm going to do. So to make a drum beat, I'm going to zoom in, and I usually like to work in 4-bar increments here. So I'm going to click on the grid and select 4 bars by clicking and dragging over 1, 2, 3, and 4 bars. Once you've done that, you need to insert a MIDI clip, and you can do that by hitting Command Shift and M. And that will open up a MIDI clip and open up your MIDI editor, where you can place MIDI notes to trigger the samplers inside of the drum rack along the top line. That's basically what we have going on here. Each note is triggering a different simpler. It's triggering a different simpler, and that each of these simplers have different drums in them. And then this is your time along this way. So we have our grid split up to 16th notes, which means every one of these small squares is a 16th note, and it's the beat. Yeah, you understand. So the way I usually start out with, because like I said, I like that kind of like dubstep beat, I'll do kick on the 1. Oh, and this is another trick. Notice how you didn't hear anything. This headphone icon, you have to click if you want to be able to hear what you're doing, unless you want to just replay it a bunch. This blue headphone icon, that's like, I would say those are the two reasons why people think that Ableton is hard, is because they open up the MIDI editor and they can't get any sound out of it because they don't know to click that, and because it starts in the session view. Anyway, click that to hear what you're doing. So kick on the 1, and then on the 0.2 I'll try a snare, see how that sounds. So we'll do, okay, a little too fast, so I'm going to scoot this over to the 3. Alright, I would like faster tempo, so I'm going to crank this up to 140, our tempo slider up here at the top. And I'm pressing the space bar to play to launch the timeline, to set it going. So, very cool. We have 1 bar beat with kick and snare pattern. To copy this over into the next bar, you can hold shift and click on the key. That's usually how I like to do it, is I click on the piano key while I'm holding shift, and it'll select all of the ones on that key. And to duplicate, I like to hold the option key on Mac and drag to the next position, and make sure you let go of the mouse before you let go of the option key, otherwise it will not copy. So now we have cool dubstep beat. We're getting there. So there are 2 ways to do this. It depends on how you want to do it. Sometimes I would argue that it's a good idea to split this MIDI clip in half up here. That way you can have, you know, two bars of this drum beat, 2 bars of this drum beat, and you're able to vary them up. But you can really do it you can really do the same thing, So it doesn't really matter however you want to do it. I'm going to keep them together, and I'm just going to do the same thing. Click a key, shift click, and then hold option and drag these out. Okay. Take a listen. Like I said, I'm pressing space bar to launch the timeline so you can play. So now we have beat. This is cool. 4 bars is like a phrase. That's why I like to work in 4-bar increments such as this, is because 4 bars is a phrase. And there can be see with this beat that we have, there can be a fill at the end here, or we can add in. There's a lot of space, there's a lot of things we can still do with this. I like to start off with my beats pretty basic. So to loop this, a couple ways to do that. You can grab this bracket here and drag the bracket over to, and make sure it's highlighting it. I think it automatically defaults to be in 4 bars long, but if it's not, say it's like 2 bars long or 1 bar long, you just grab one of the sides and you can rearrange it. And then you can click this button right up here. Is how to turn the loop on and off. So when that's turned on, it will play through and then loop. Okay, so this is a good way to work. Here, I'm also going to check these levels just real quick. This is a good way to work because it allows you to just keep repeating the same section over and over again while you add things to this. This is basically going to form the backbone of your song. So we have that looped. That's one way to do it. There's another way to loop stuff. I find this a little bit faster, and this is the one I usually use. If you click on the top of the clip, notice how I said the top, because that's another thing, distinction to make, is The bottom to middle section of a MIDI clip or audio clip is the grid that you're selecting. The top up here is the clip. So if you click the top and hold and drag, it'll move the actual clip. If you click the middle of the MIDI clip and hold and drag, it will select the grid. So that's just kind of that's a Ableton thing. It's kind of just something to get used to and to just be aware of. But anyway, if you click the top of the MIDI clip and hit Command L, that will loop the clip. It's just a little bit easier. You can do it either way, just a little easier. So, okay, we've got our basic drum beat. Now, some people like to add, more drums into this same rack. And if you have a slower computer, you probably should do that. But if your computer is decent enough, I would suggest making another MIDI clip, and you make new MIDI clips with Command Shift and T. That's how you make a new MIDI clip. To make a new audio clip, it's just Command T. You don't hit the Shift button, but we don't need a new audio clip right now. Like I said, the reason I like to do this is because depending on how you want to pitch things, how you want to mix things, a lot of times I like putting a drum bus plugin on this main kick and snare rack and limiting it to -6, just because I just like how that kind of hits through when it goes into the limiter. And when you do that, you don't want your hi-hats to be in this drum rack, because then they will also be limited to -6, and a lot of times you want your hi-hats to be a little bit quieter. So I'm going to take a new drum rack, load it into this track right here, and I'm going to call this hats. Oops. I'm going to call this hats. And inside of this, I'm going to go to my sample pack, and I'm going to find some closed hats. Actually, we could call this one Cymbals. I don't know how to spell. So we'll find some closed hats. Sounds alright. More like a shaker. There's this one. We will find some open hats. Here's some open hats. Yep. Grab one of those. Then we can find a crash. I like to have in this folder a crash. Any crash will do. Probably like this one because it's nice and noisy. So I'll put one in here, and then also what I'll do is I will duplicate this exact same crash and reverse it so that I can have a reverse crash in the cymbals group. So to duplicate inside of a drum rack, it's the same way as to duplicate anything. You hold down the Option button, click, and drag. Now you have two of the same samples in two different drum cells. Whoops. And so I like to click one of them, usually the second one, and if you right click on this simpler, you can click reverse sample and it will reverse that. You may have to move this playhead back and forth a little bit to kind of get the timing right when you go to sequence things, but for the most part it should work. Also, whenever you're doing this kind of thing, turning this warp mode on will help your crashes all kind of stay in time, especially for reverse crashes. It's really only important for stuff like this because it's going to be on a time based kind of thing when you want it to kind of go into the next section. So we've got our open hats, closed hats, crashes. Sometimes I like a ride in here, but it's not super necessary. That one and that one. Those sound good. Okay, so now old familiar beat. We need to make another MIDI clip to sequence these drum samples that we have in our drum rack. If you recall, to do that, you highlight on the grid the section where you want to place the MIDI clip and hit Command Shift M. That will make a new MIDI clip and open this up. If that doesn't open up automatically, the MIDI piano roll, whenever you do that, to open that, you just double click on the top part of the MIDI clip right there. Yeah, just on that top part. So now we have that. What I like usually for this kind of beat is an offbeat hi-hat. So I like to put like a, and then So now that we have those selected, we can just take that, option click to duplicate, and drag them over to the next one. Cool. So now we have a beat, pretty basic beat, but that's kind of how I like to start whenever I'm starting off making tunes like this. So now that we have our beat, we need to get some sub bass. I like to get my main beat and my subs, get a little bass line going, make something kind of groovy, make something start happening. So to add another instrument, we need to make a new MIDI track. To make a new MIDI track, it is Command, Shift, and T when you have your track selected. Makes a blank MIDI track. Now we are going to add in bass. What a lot of people use was called the hip hop sub. I have Live 11, and I think it got the name got changed to Sine sub. Okay. Oh, that's another thing. Sorry, I should explain. The way that I usually find stuff, you could go through and you could click through some of these presets and stuff like that, but I've found it's just way easier to, if you know what you're looking for, to hit Command F. What Command F will do is open up the search bar, and typically it defaults to all results, but sometimes it will default to whatever folder you are currently in. So if you can't find what you're looking for, check over here on this little side, on the sidebar to the left, and make sure you're on all results, and I will search for sine sub, I'm pretty sure is what it's called. Yeah, sine sub, basic sine sub bass, I think is what they're calling it now. And if you have musical typing turned on up here, if you click this, you can play notes with your keyboard. And if you hear that, it is a pretty basic kind of thing, but it sounds like there's a little distortion. Maybe it's basic sub sine. I think they're pretty much the same. So whichever one you have, sub sine bass, basic sub sine. I think it's basic sine sub. I don't know. Either way. And so that's a little bit of distortion there. Not sure what the drop does. Tone, maybe makes it a little distortion. I like turning glide on. If you turn it on a little higher, you can hear kind of what it does. It just slides. I like that. So I wish I knew which one was the actual one, because sometimes, let me check this one too. It's a little harder. Hopefully this is the one that everybody has, because that's the one that makes the most sense. So I'll turn some of the overtones on, because what that will do is make you able to hear it on different speakers. And if you can see, we're kind of redlining here on our master, so I'll just turn this down a little bit. Depending on what note you're playing, you'll be able to hear it better than other. If you turn up some of the distortion, you'll be able to hear it a little bit better. And you can use anything as a bass, but just like that. Turn the glide up. I think 30 to 50 is a good spot for both. You turn it up even a little more. It'll just take a little bit longer. So this is kind of where I start to break it up into smaller pieces, just because it's easier for me to do 2 bars of a bass line and then do some variation on the next 2 bars. So we'll make a new MIDI note, or a new MIDI clip in this MIDI track with Command Shift M. Remember, you highlight the area on the grid, hit Command Shift M, that makes a new MIDI clip. And we will click into here. Need to make sure this video isn't too long. How long are we? We're at 20 minutes already. Jesus. Okay. Well, we're gonna cut this off right after I make a short little bass line. That way these don't get too long. So depending on what key you want to play in, C is sometimes the easiest because it's all the white keys. That's C major. If you start from an A, that makes it minor. I like playing with minor keys better. I just think major keys are kind of goofy. So we'll pitch that down until it sounds like a bass. Since we have so many harmonics, this low A kind of sounds cool, but it usually, if this was clean, it probably wouldn't come through as good. So maybe we'll do like, so we'll find a little bass line, we'll just go. Do like a, and then maybe we'll do another one here, and we'll pitch it up. use the recorder notes, which is like a thing. So, okay, I'm pretty happy with that. If we want to keep looping this to keep working on it, we can drag this back to the 2 bars. But I think that's a good place to start for this. You can make it a little bit longer. This loop bracket here. And make another MIDI clip, Command Shift M, and it will open us up. Now, if we want to join these 2 together and just do it inside of here, which a lot of times is easier to do, we can click the tops of both clips and hit Command J, and that will join the clips together. So I think it would sound good if we did some more of these quarter notes. So I'm going to copy these over to the next section. Oh. Okay, sorry about that. I thought I burned my pizza, but I did not. Okay. Even another like 4 of these could sound good. See, I'm kind of just I'm trying to make a rhythm that interacts with the bass line, and it doesn't have to be super interesting. I kind of just want to make it bob my head. I just want to make it, because that's the vibe that I like my music to have. It's very head naughty and like head boppy. So yeah, so that's a good bass line to start off with, and you can already kind of see a little bit of the direction I'm going, and this can always be changed. You can do anything in here. This is just usually my quick go-to. I'm trying to get a groove going, I'm trying to make something, I'm trying to do something. This is my bare bones kind of skeleton that I usually start off with, is sort of a groove, and at this point I'll start doing a little bit more sound design. I'll start beefing these drums up a little bit, and I will start making these cymbals sound a little nicer. I just like to start off with a groove first, and if you can get to this point, you are doing okay. So I'll pick up this video in the next video. This one's getting long enough. So yeah, Dr. Robert out.